The plasma rounds hit 3 seconds after the parents stopped breathing. Jake Carter threw himself over the squirming hatchling as the ceiling exploded above them, raining molten debris across the bunker floor. The Drolfian mother had pressed the infant dragon into his arms with her last breath, whispering a single word he didn't understand. Now she and her mate were ash, and Jake was alone with a creature no bigger than a house cat, scaled in midnight blue and crying like a wounded bird. He ran. The colony was already dead, buildings gutted by orbital strikes, streets choked with smoke. Krex's warships blackened the sky, hunting survivors. Jake tucked the hatchling inside his jacket and sprinted through the ruins, boots crunching on glass. The dragon, Babloo according to the data chip the mother had shoved into his hand, trembled against his chest. Its tiny claws dug through his shirt. Warm, terrified, alive. A hunter drone screamed overhead. Jake dove into a collapsed transit station, rolling hard as the explosion tore apart the street behind him. Babloo shrieked. The sound punched through Jake's skull like a spike. He clamped a hand over the hatchling's snout. Silence. The drone circled, sensors sweeping. Jake held his breath. After an eternity, it moved on. He checked the data chip on his wrist display. His blood went cold. Babloo wasn't just any dragon. He carried a genetic sequence that made him immune to resonance weapons, the backbone of every modern arsenal. Krex didn't want the colony. He wanted Babloo, a breeding program, an army of unkillable dragons. Jake looked down at the hatchling, staring up at him with silver eyes too intelligent for an infant. This wasn't a protection job anymore. This was a war. The next 2 days blurred into a nightmare of narrow escapes and sleepless sprints. Babloo wouldn't eat the rations Jake offered, wouldn't stop crying. Jake tried everything, water, dried meat, even his own blood in desperation. Nothing worked. The hatchling grew weaker. On the 3rd night, hiding in an abandoned factory, Jake sat against a wall and held Babloo close, feeling the tiny heartbeats slow. He was failing. The parents had trusted him and he was failing. Then Babloo nuzzled against his neck and purred. The sound was soft, almost musical. Jake felt something shift inside him, a warmth that had nothing to do with body heat. He started humming, an old song his sister used to sing. Babloo's eyes brightened. The hatchling crawled up to Jake's shoulder and nibbled his ear, gentle, playful. Jake laughed despite everything. He found a cache of liquid nutrients in the factory storage and warmed it over a fire. Babloo drank eagerly, tiny tongue lapping at the bowl. For the first time since the parents died, Jake felt something other than dread. Hope. The factory exploded inward at dawn. Krex's lieutenant, Vara, stepped through the smoke with 20 soldiers. She was Corthan, 8 feet of scales and muscle, holding a plasma cannon like a pistol. Jake grabbed Babloo and ran deeper into the facility, weaving through machinery. Vara's laughter echoed behind him. She wasn't hurrying. She knew he was trapped. Jake reached the mining pit at the factory's heart and stopped. 100-foot drop into darkness. No way out. Vara emerged from the shadows, weapon raised. Jake turned, shielding Babloo with his body. The hatchling squirmed free and jumped to the ground, facing Vara. It spread its tiny wings and hissed. Vara fired. The plasma bolts screamed toward them. Babloo opened his mouth and a shimmer of energy erupted outward, bending the bolt away. It struck the wall. Harmless. Jake stared. Vara stared. Babloo collapsed, exhausted. Jake scooped him up and jumped into the pit. They fell through darkness. Jake hit water, the impact driving the air from his lungs. He kicked upward, breaking the surface in an underground river. The current dragged them away from Vara's shouts. Jake held Babloo above the water and let the river carry them into the deep. He crawled onto a muddy bank miles downstream, coughing water. Babloo lay still in his arms. Too still. Jake pressed his ear to the hatchling's chest. Nothing. Panic clawed at him. He started compressions, counting, breathing into Babloo's tiny mouth. Come on. Come on. Babloo's eyes snapped open. He coughed up water and sneezed flame, singeing Jake's eyebrows. Jake laughed until he cried, holding the hatchling close. His calm crackled. A woman's voice, human, cutting through the static. Nina Brooks. Resistance. She'd been tracking his movements, watching him protect Babloo. She had a ship, an escape route, but they had to move now. Krex had deployed everything. The planet would be glass in 48 hours. Jake met Nina's team at the old starport. A dozen fighters armed with scavenged weapons in desperation. Nina was lean, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much death. She looked at Babloo and shook her head. "We're risking everything for a lizard." Jake met her gaze. "He's not a lizard. He's the reason we fight." Nina didn't argue. They loaded into 2 transports, engines roaring. Krex's ships descended like falling stars. The first transport exploded before it cleared the ground. Nina screamed into the comm. Evasive maneuvers, but there were too many. They were surrounded. Babloo climbed onto the cockpit console, wings spreading wider than they should. He was growing. Fast. Stress-induced maturation, Nina whispered. Dragons do that. Babloo turned to Jake and chirped, "Trust me." Jake nodded. "Do it." The hatchling, now the size of a large dog, launched himself at the canopy. It shattered. Babloo soared into the sky, roaring. The sound shook the air. Krex's fighters turned toward him. Babloo dove, claws raking across a ship's hull. It spiraled into the ground. Another ship fired. Babloo twisted midair, flames erupting from his jaws, melting the incoming missiles. He was magnificent. He was impossible. Nina stared. "Get us to the fortress." Jake looked at her. "What fortress?" "The one we're going to bury Krex in." They lured Krex's command ship to the ancient Drothian stronghold at the planet's edge, a crumbling tower filled with unstable power cores. Nina's team set the charges while Jake and Babloo waited at the top. Krex landed personally, stepping out in full battle armor. He wanted to watch Babloo's capture. Jake stood at the tower's edge, Babloo beside him, now the size of a pony and still growing. Krex laughed. "You think a baby dragon can stop me, human?" Jake smiled. "No, I think a baby dragon can end you." Babloo roared. The fortress shook. The charges detonated. The tower collapsed inward, power cores rupturing. Krex's ship tried to lift off. Babloo spread his wings, now massive, and flew straight at it. Fire poured from his mouth, white hot, cutting through shields and armor like paper. The ship broke apart, Krex screaming inside. Babloo circled back, landing beside Jake as the fortress crumbled. Nina's ship descended. They climbed aboard, Babloo barely fitting through the cargo bay. As they broke atmosphere, Jake looked down at the dragon resting his head on Jake's lap, exhausted. "You saved us all, buddy," Babloo purred. Nina set course for the outer colonies. Word spread fast. The human who raised a dragon, the hatchling who burned a warlord. They became a symbol, proof that protecting the innocent, no matter how small or strange, was worth any cost. Jake stroked Babloo's scales and watched the stars. The parents had charged him with a baby dragon, and that altered everything. Not just the war, not just the galaxy, everything inside him. He wasn't a mercenary anymore. He was a guardian, and he'd die before he failed that trust again.